on our presentations in celebration of the Ignatian year. The fall presentations have been focused upon the call to the universal apostolic preferences of the Society of Jesus. For those who've been with us before, we first started with Terry Redmond, who spoke on our COVID response under the preference collaborate in the care of our common home. And then last month we had Dr. Dan Finucane of Theological Studies, and he spoke on his experience under the preference to accompany young people in the creation of a hope-filled future. And today I'm really pleased to welcome Diego Abente, who is the president and CEO of Casa de Salud. And he will be speaking under the preference to walk with the poor, the outcasts of the world, those whose dignity has been violated, in a mission of reconciliation and justice. I'll tell you a little bit more about Diego in just a minute, but I thought since yesterday was the feast day of Saint Rose Philippine Duchesne, who is buried here at the Academy of the Sacred Heart in St. Charles, that we would start with a prayer by Saint Rose Philippine. Just a little bit of a background for her. She came to the US at the age of 49 with 4 sisters, religious of the Sacred Heart. During those first 49 years, she lived in Grenoble and then in Paris, and most of her time in France was during the Reign of Terror and the French Revolution. Bishop de Burgh invited her and the sisters to come to St. Louis, where they established the Academy of the Sacred Heart in St. Charles in 1818. Famously, at the age of 71, she then went to the Kansas, well, what was then the Indian Territory in eastern Kansas. That was her original reason and desire to come to the States, was to work with the native peoples. But she couldn't learn Potawatomi, but she made her impression with the native peoples, who gave her the title Woman Who Prays Always. She returned after a year to St. Louis, and she died in 1852 at the age of 83. And Pope St. John Paul II canonized her in 1988. And this is one of her prayers. I am where God wills me to be, and so have found rest and security. His wisdom governs me, his power defends me, his grace sanctifies me, his mercy accompanies me, his joy sustains me, and all will go well with me. Amen. So again, I'd like to welcome Diego Abente, President and CEO of Casa de Salud, a St. Louis nonprofit dedicated to delivering high-quality clinical and mental health care to the uninsured, with a special focus on the immigrant community. For those of us here at St. Louis U, the university was instrumental in bringing Casa into being. Diego combines his immigrant story, passion for service, and 20 years of nonprofit management experience to lead a results-driven team of staff and volunteers. In this role, he sets the vision for programmatic growth and financial sustainability, as well as Casa's contributions to building a better regional safety net. Prior to joining Casa, he served as Vice President of Economic Development for the International Institute of St. Louis and President of the International Institute Community Development Corporation, where he helped immigrant entrepreneurs access to credit and develop the business acumen needed to ensure their success. He's a graduate of the Hispanic Leadership Institute and of Leadership St. Louis. And prior to coming to St. Louis, he has had a long history of working for nonprofits and government organizations. He served as Paraguay's consular representative at the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, and prior to that, managed operations for a nonprofit working to eradicate malaria in Equatorial Guinea. He began his career as a staff attorney for Paraguay's Department of the Treasury. He holds degrees from the Catholic University of Paraguay and from the University of Birmingham in the United Kingdom, and an executive Master's of Business Administration degree from that other university across the park. So Diego, welcome so much. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for that generous introduction. And thank you for allowing me to speak to you this lunchtime. The first thing I'm going to do is probably the scariest thing I'm going to do, which is try to share my screen with you in such a way that you can see my presentation and hopefully hear some video that I've got. So I will attend to that and then we'll get going. All right, can folks see my screen? Thumbs up would be nice. Perfect, or a shake of the head is great. Well, thank you again for the opportunity to present. And yes, again, my name is Diego Abente, and my most recent title came from the university across the way that shall not be named. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity today to be able to be with you and reflect on this preference. And I want to do that by being very vulnerable and sharing with you my story, my immigrant story, and what brought me here today, and then use that as a segue into telling you a bit about what CASA does, and who the people that we serve at CASA are. And I hope that we can all conclude that in the pursuit of this cause, of this preference that you mentioned, Father Sawalski, that we are together building more equitable, diverse, and thriving communities. And so getting right into it, I was born in a small country in the heart of South America called Paraguay. And my parents, who were young and in college at the time when they had me, were also struggling because Paraguay was under a very violent and bloody and deadly dictatorship, one that ended up being one of the longest dictatorships in South America. And being young and hopeful, both were very much involved in organizing and trying to hold the country more accountable and moving it towards democracy. And as a result of this, my dad, I'm hearing some feedback. As a result of this, my dad was repeatedly jailed, tortured, and then released. And every time that he was jailed, without trial, let it be said, and tortured, he was asked, and I say asked in air quotes here, to sign documents declaring that he and his friends were communists and enemies of the state. And of course, my dad repeatedly refused to sign those documents. They were inaccurate. And so in response, the dictator ordered that they jail my mother, who happened to be 7 months pregnant with me. And so, as you might imagine, a woman 7 months pregnant in a jail under duress became malnourished. And so she struggled, but was miraculously able to still have me. But she had me completely alone, and I'm not exaggerating, with no medical support. And only after I was born and only after I survived the first couple of days did word make it out to her parents, my grandparents, that I had been born and was alive. And they negotiated with the dictator by signing over some of their property to exchange that property for safe passage for me out. But before I was able and I was given as a baby safe passage out of jail, the government recorded my birth as a child of communism and a potential enemy of the state. And my mom wasn't, in fact, released from jail until several months after I had been released. And unfortunately, our story is only one of many thousands like it, and many even more that were worse than ours, that happened during this 54-year dictatorship in Paraguay. And the dictator, for better or for worse, I guess, was also committed to documenting meticulously all of the atrocious acts that he was ordering his lackeys to do. And so on this slide on the right-hand side, you can see the museum that was created to memorialize the records that document this very dark period in Paraguay. And I want to translate the title because it's very formal. It's called the Museum of Justice and the Center for Documentation and Archives for the Defense of Human Rights. It's more commonly known in Paraguay as the Archives of Terror, a word that came up in our initial remarks here, and I think really resonates with this time in Paraguay. And so on the bottom left, what I want to show you is an example of a prisoner file. In the archives, there is a file that looks much like this with my dad's information on it. There is another one with my mom's information on it. And there is one with a baby picture of me on it. And so these things are real, and these atrocities are real. And through the help of many that I will mention later in this presentation, we were able to really rebound from this. But wanted to bring that to the conversation because unfortunately, things like this continue to happen in our world. And then on the top left, just to end this slide, I wanted to show you this picture of a stack of these files that were removed from an official government building and put in the back room of a house with the intent of disposing of them, burning them or something like that. And luckily they were found and are now housed in this museum to really help people never forget what happened and hopefully send a message to the rest of the world to not allow these atrocities to happen. And why is that important and to this story and to what we want to talk about today? I think it's important because the only reason that I'm here today to talk to you about my story and to talk to you about Acasa what CASA does is because my family was given safe passage to the United States. So shortly after my mom was released from jail, my parents began looking for ways to leave Paraguay. You might not be surprised, given what I've shared with you, that they really did feel like outcasts. They had their dignity denied and stripped of them many times over. And that was not a world that they wanted to bring their children into. And now they had one. And so eventually the United States opened its arms to my family, and we arrived here in 1978 as asylees. And that decision that my parents made to move away from home and to help, to bring us to a place where they didn't know the language and the culture was really driven by that desire that a parent has to create a better life for future generations. And they were called, of course, to give of themselves so that we could grow up with the dignity that they were denied, that they were stripped of. And throughout our time, first in New Mexico and then in Ohio, they were very good about asking us to really compare our upbringing and the opportunities that we had before us with those of our cousins and folks that we knew that remained in Paraguay. And as kids, we really embraced this, and it began to really shape us, and would eventually, I think, very much influence what we chose to do as human beings, me and my two siblings, and what career choices we made. And so as you can imagine, coming here in 1978 and starting over was a very significant event for my family. And one of the ways that they chose to memorialize this was by taking this picture that I'm showing with you here on the right-hand side of the slide. And I didn't know that this picture existed until my 30th birthday, when my stereotypically Latina mother decided that I had finally reached puberty and wanted to share that milestone with the world. Unfortunately, at that time, Facebook already existed. And so she proceeded to post this and many other very embarrassing pics of me to Facebook. And I was understandably, I think, mortified. But when I looked at this picture, it really struck me, and it called to me. And so I downloaded this one. And a few years later, I had a conversation with my mom, and I asked her, Mom, what is it about this picture that, made you decide it needed to go on Facebook and be shared with everyone? And she said, what this picture says to me is really marking our passage into the United States and signifying how safe and how hopeful we were when we arrived. But more importantly, that smile, sorry, I get emotional every time I share this. I tell myself I won't, but I will. That smile really represents the hope and the opportunity that we all knew we had, having been able to surpass our challenges and come to the United States and have the opportunity to grow up here versus anywhere else in the world. And, throughout our time in the United States, countless individuals reached out and were helpful to my parents and guiding them in this new country. And so many, hugely hearted individuals reached out to these quirky new little kids in school who spoke a funny language. And together, through their kindness and through their desire to get to know these new members of the community, they really helped us feel like we belonged, and charted us on this path to becoming who we are today. And so I think that was a very important lesson for me and my two siblings to learn. And as I said, really shaped who we are today and continues to shape us and what we do and how we present ourselves to our own families now and to the community. Now, I didn't learn about this journey to the United States until my teens, but when I did learn about it, and when me and my siblings now do discuss how that might have shaped us, we all agree that it was certainly a milestone that allowed us to really think critically about what we wanted to do with our lives and how we wanted to honor the help that we had received. And so, my youngest brother now is, who was born in the United States, I have to clarify this, not born anywhere else, but in the United States, is a member of the US Navy. He's an officer who studies viruses. And my middle brother worked in international development, much like I did in my early career, and spent a lot of time in Africa helping developing countries there, and is now a consultant in Washington, D.C. And I've spent my entire career in government and nonprofit spaces, including a stint in Paraguay, where I helped the government on transparency and accountability initiatives. And so, this really speaks to the fact that others chose to walk with us. And when it was our turn, we felt compelled to pay that forward and walk for and with others. And that's what brings me to Casa de Salud. It may be a simple immigrant story, but I think also a very powerful immigrant story. It's a labor of love for me. It's a way to recognize that time that was very difficult for my mother and for myself when we were denied the basic care that any human being deserves. An experience that ostensibly marked us forever continues to influence our decisions. And so through my work at Casa, what I seek to ensure is that immigrants arriving to our community find that same encouragement and support that my family did. And Casa in particular, because of the work that we do, really serves as a beacon in our community, signaling that dignity and justice as the preference calls us to walk can be obtained here in our region. And we do that through the mission of facilitating and delivering high quality clinical and mental health care services for our region's under and uninsured, focusing, of course, on immigrants and refugees, because as they arrive in our region, because they speak a different language, because they bring a different culture, they really do struggle to really learn what the resources are in the community and access and benefit from those resources so that then they can give back to the community in the same way that my family chose to give back when it was our turn to do so. And I do have to mention, as Father Sawalski did, that it is not a coincidence that that Casa de Salud is the physical facility is on the St. Louis University campus at 3200 Choteau Avenue. St. Louis University is a founding and sustaining partner, believes deeply in our mission, and is there for us whenever we need them as a support. And without this unyielding partner, we would not be able to do what we do and carry our mission. So we are eternally grateful for that partnership that we have through the university. But what I just shared is really just my deeply held belief about what Casa is, what it represents, and how it helps me give back to the community. And what I want to do now is share a little bit about what others say about Casa and feel about Casa. And so a few years back, we did a survey and we asked people to tell us what words came to mind when they thought about Casa. And I thought this was very powerful as I arrived to read these words. And so when I see here welcoming and warm and trusted and caring and inclusive and passionate, and these are words that our stakeholders and that our patients think of when they think of Casa, I know that we're on the right track and that we have the potential to continue to do a lot of good in our community. And so what is that good? What is it that Casa does? How do we, as I like to say, make the magic happen? It happens really through a very unique service delivery model, which recognizes and brings to the table the experience of our medical professionals here in the region and our mental health professionals, and supports them and surrounds them with multilingual, multicultural staff to create this very unique patient and client experience that helps to build trust and helps folks really along that journey of health and wellness. They begin to understand the power of that technical, medical, and mental health expertise within the context of this acculturation that they're all experiencing, really bringing the beauty and the richness of their culture into the culture of the United States and creating something better for it. And so together with our many regional partners, we're building a more culturally competent safety net by doing this work. And this no doubt is leading to better health outcomes because more people are becoming engaged and involved and have agency to take care of their own health. And so over time, Casa has grown its services extremely intentionally and always in response to the community. And so what you see here on the left-hand side of this slide from the bottom up is how we've decided to grow the organization. So our core and sort of anchoring service is primary healthcare. That's how we started. And that is sort of the pathway through which most patients enter and get to know Casa. And there we provide, as the name would suggest, primary healthcare, but we do also provide some specialty care like psychiatry, gynecology, dermatology, and basic healthcare screenings and prevention services. And then in 2015, we we extended our services for the first time intentionally. And we did that to create a case management program, which is called the GUIA program. And GUIA quite simply means in Spanish, guide. And that's exactly what our case management guias do. They guide patients on their healthcare journey from the moment they enter the doors at CASA all the way through to the conclusion of their follow-up services that they may need in the wider healthcare space with other organizations like federally qualified healthcare centers and hospitals. And at the same time, these guides, what they're doing is they're really helping our patients understand the patient-provider relationship. And at the same time, they're helping providers deliver their care across culture in a way that's more efficient and effective, really recognizing that there's a lot of learning that happens when you deliver care across cultures. In 2018, we took another step in expanding our services, recognizing that there wasn't a really good place for immigrants in our community to access mental health care. And so we launched the Mental Health Care Collaborative, which recognizes, on the one hand, that demand, but on the other hand, that there is great resource in our community. And by coming together and collaborating, we better meet that demand than by one organization on its own, like Casa de Salud, for example, addressing that need. And so the collaborative is a partnership, and it brings together mental health agencies and professionals that are working together to deliver culturally sensitive behavioral health because they're supported by CASA's multilingual, multicultural staff, and because that's informing the way that they convey that technical specialty that they have as therapists. And then finally, I do want to mention, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, that as a result of the pandemic, CASA, like many other nonprofit organizations, during the pandemic, we were forced to really think about how to utilize technology to stay in touch with our patients and our clients. And so we did begin to use telehealth as a tool to help us continue to provide care during one of the scariest times of our generation. And we found that telehealth can be a really important tool in providing healthcare, but it is only that. It is a tool which allows us to reach folks. It is not in and of itself service provision. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in just a minute here. So the 30,000-foot view of what CASA's patients and client looks like is really interesting. It really does cover the entire metro area in St. Louis on both sides of the river. We see folks who represent more than 30 counties across that geographical space, and they bring with them the richness of more than 60 nationalities that span the entire globe. So it really is a multicultural patient and client base that are seeking health, wellness, and productivity through their interactions with CASA. And so now I want to bring us back down to sort of what does the average patient look like? If that's the view from above, what does it look like to interact with one particular patient? And what we find is that we have an equal distribution across gender, that most of our patients are of working age, 35 to 45 years old, that the overwhelming majority, when they come to CASA, request interpretation services. That is, they want to receive the service in their native language. And in many ways, that's not surprising, but in others, that's telling of the need to provide service across culture and across language. And then the overwhelming majority are also parents and guardians. So they are taking care of themselves and their households. And finally, and relevant to the pandemic, what we find is that the majority of them work in what today we commonly call the essential workforce, the part of the economy that even during a pandemic, we want to do our best to keep, at least to some degree, functioning. And so we see that our patients and clients are crucial members of the healthcare service, hospitality, retail, food, and construction sectors. And yet, the pandemic, COVID-19, has been especially devastating for Hispanic and Latinx people. We are 2 times more likely to get COVID-19 and die from it, and we are more than 3 times more likely to be hospitalized by it. And during the pandemic, many immigrants struggled to get timely and accurate information to protect themselves from this increased risk, especially in their own language. And so I want to ask you to just go back with me to the scariest times during the pandemic, when we were all very fearful and anxious, and we were scrambling to find information, and we were looking to our trusted sources in the community, doctors and scientists and others, to help us understand this pandemic. And now I want to ask you to imagine living in that moment and receiving what little information that there was in a language other than your preferred language, which for most of us is English. That is what immigrants, Spanish speakers, and speakers of other non-English languages were struggling with during the pandemic. And yet, because they were part of that essential workforce, they continued to show up, even though they were scared, even though they really struggled to find accurate in their own language information. They continued to be there for their families and for our community. And so one of the things that we started doing at Casa in response was to develop plain language, preferred language content to help our patients stay safe and get the information they needed to make informed decisions. And we learned during this time that what people needed the most was information that was timely, that was free of jargon, that was informative, that provided a space for dialogue that is question and answer, and that then would provide a direct pathway to action once folks had had the opportunity to receive the information, ask questions. And so we started to develop information that included these very elemental but very powerful pieces. And what I'm about to show you this video is something that we're very proud of, because it was one of our first, one of the first pieces of information that we produced that tried to marry these lessons learned from our patients as we tried to develop the information that they were looking for. And so this is a video that helps people prepare for their telehealth visit, which for many of us was extremely new and only happened as a result of the pandemic. It was developed in English and in Spanish. It's on our website, and it can be sent as a link so that people can access it. And so I'm going to play this video right now, and if folks can't hear it, I'm going to ask for someone to let me know so that...
How to prepare for your telehealth appointment with Casa de Salud. Hello. Thank you for scheduling a telehealth appointment to see a doctor from Casa de Salud. Your health is important to us. 2 days before your appointment, you will get a confirmation email from us. It will tell you how to join the appointment from home using your own device. Here are the steps for using your own device for a telehealth appointment. 1 to 2 days before your appointment, write a list of things you want to talk about during the appointment, such as any questions you have for the doctor, your symptoms and the date they started, and any requests you have. Decide which room you will be in for the appointment. A room that is quiet and private is best. It also needs to have good light and a working internet connection. Get your device ready for your appointment. Choose a device, such as a smartphone, tablet, or computer. Also, make sure you have the Zoom app installed on your device. If Zoom is not on your device yet, to download and install it, visit zoom.us/download. 15 minutes before your appointment, gather these supplies: all of the medicines you take, a thermometer, and your list of questions and other notes. 5 minutes before your appointment, connect to the telehealth video call by clicking on the Zoom link in the confirmation email we sent to you. You will be placed in a virtual waiting room until the doctor is ready to see you. The appointment will include a doctor and a medical assistant. If needed, your doctor may use an interpreter and a medical scribe. If you have questions about telehealth or need help downloading Zoom, visit Casa's website for more information. You can also call us at 314-9...
I'll spare you guys at the last piece, but as a result of putting together materials like that and disseminating them, what we did is we connected with folks, and folks then looked to us, Casa de Salud, as a trusted resource. And so throughout the pandemic, many of our patients came to us first when they had concerns. And the story I'm about to share with you is what I would call a success story from one of our patients. I'm going to use a fictitious name in this case. His name is Juan, and he works as a Lyft driver. And early on in the pandemic, his only source of Spanish language information about COVID-19 was from Casa. So when he began to develop symptoms, he came to us. And it wasn't just because he was concerned for his health. He didn't want to continue driving, putting others at risk until he knew if he was or was not COVID positive. And again, because these were the early days, he didn't know what to do next, except for to come to the source of information and ask the question, what do I do next? And so he bravely and patiently waited with us in the parking lot of Casa de Salud at 3200 Shoto for over an hour as we frantically called around to find a place where he could go get tested. And that was the end of it for us until a few weeks later when he made our day by calling us up and saying, thank you so much for spending time with me, for accompanying me, and for helping me find the resources that I need. I feel much better now. I'm okay, and I'm back to driving and being able to provide for myself and my family. And little things like that really make our day and help energize us as we move forward and continue to serve other patients. And here is another great success story that speaks to how when we connect with people genuinely in their native language and provide them that opportunity to take agency and action for the benefit of their health, we create success stories. This is a rare example where a patient actually wanted to tell her own story. And so Nakarit Perez, who will be speaking to you on this video in a second, is a real patient of Casa's. And she was so touched by the service that we provided her that she asked that we memorialize her story in this video. So I will play it now.
So I was first connected to Nakarit in August of 2020 after a telehealth visit she had with Dr. Goldman. It seems that she had some referrals and some imaging done outside of Casa de Salud.
El año pasado me realizaron un MRI que no tenía nada que ver con mi útero.
Last year, I was given an order to do an MRI, and the results showed that there was a very enlarged tumor.
It seemed like she was getting conflicting information, given really long wait times, and she wasn't sure if it was a language barrier difference that she wasn't understanding, or if it was actually, this is the expectation of the care that she should be receiving.
En un mes me lo resolvieron.
And what told me that it could be a long wait of 6 months and that I'd be in 8 months. Some providers that my job sent me to told me that it should be better to kind of wait it off. But I had a second opinion here at Casa de Salud, and they told me that it should be taken care of immediately.
We were able to get her an appointment within just a couple weeks at SluCare OB-GYN, where she had her full physical exam.
Durante la pandemia,
So during the pandemic, Casa de Salud have been able to help me virtually.
We made sure to request an interpreter so to make sure that no one in her family had to interpret for her and that she was really understanding the information in her native language.
aunque el Dr. Goldman...
I basically just talked to the doctor once. I brought the records in, they scanned them, he was able to see them, and just with one look, he determined my diagnosis, and off I went with my referral. Once
she connected there, she reached back out to me and said, was very nervous and very scared because they told her she was going to need a surgery, was going to need a hysterectomy. And because of the pain that she was in, because of her experiences at work, she had not been working consistently and was really nervous about her insurance running out. So her insurance was scheduled to run out by the end of the year, and she was told that it would take 6 months to get her in for the surgery. So that would go past the date that her insurance was going to be covering her care. So this was an urgent matter on kind of all fronts, trying to get her in as soon as possible, make sure she was connected to the surgeon.
Y también una de las cosas que me gusta es cuando me ponen en lista.
A really good feeling that I get is when they tell me that I'm on a task list to wait for my appointment, and when I'm told that, I imagine that it's going to take 4 or 6 months, and then I get a call a couple of weeks later, and it's my appointment time.
Fortunately, we were able to get her in right away for the surgery. Just within, again, another couple of weeks, she had her hysterectomy surgery and follow-up visits with SluCare OB-GYN.
Y me extrajeron
There
un
was
tumor.
a surgery practice that it was to remove the tumor.
Casa de Salud continued to work with Nakarit and help her with financial assistance, both for herself and other members of her family, to try and help pay for some of those medical bills. And we'll continue working with her until all of her medical issues are hopefully resolved and she is better for it.
Yo primero...
Dr. Goldman has been a really good doctor. My case manager, Ophelia, tremendous.
Es mi ángel.
She's my angel. Ophelia has helped me with everything. From calling to set up an appointment, to talk to the medical staff, to dealing with my financial paperwork, she's been able to take care of it all.
Salvaron mi vida.
Yeah, it saved my life.
And so Nakarit and Juan represent sort of that virtuous cycle. What happens when we give of ourselves and we accompany people on their journey towards justice and dignity? They then pay that back and pay it forward and pay it into the community that we want to build. And that's what's so refreshing about stories like this. I do realize that I'm at the 30-minute mark, so I am going to skip to the last slide. And just want to end my formal comments here before I open up to questions with a quick sort of insight into what we think is coming next for CASA and for our patients, and what we are looking to in terms of serving and being there for the community that we want to serve. And I organize my thoughts under this umbrella that ending the pandemic is only the beginning of the healing process. It's something I've been saying for quite a while now, because I don't want people to forget that the pandemic is really just one barrier that's in front of many others that existed before, continue to exist, and will require the community to come together to support and address. The first of which is the fact that we still have considerable pockets of folks in our community that are unvaccinated, and that may, if they receive timely, plain language, in-language information and opportunities to act, change their mind. And especially as new age group eligible, want information on those changes and want to be able to make informed decisions on behalf of the people that are living in their household. And so CASA wants to continue to be very much involved in that and helping them make the decisions that they feel are right for their families. We also see that as the pandemic ebbs and flows, folks are having to really struggle with the priorities in their lives between work and continuing to care for themselves. And we want to do everything we can to take that, to really help them balance that and not have to make a binary choice between work and healthcare. And so extending telehealth as a tool which allows them to potentially ask a physician if it's okay that they continue working and maybe push out an appointment a few months into the future, or whether it's really time for them to come in because it's been a while and they need to get some vitals and they should have a more thorough appointment with their physician in order to prevent any conditions that may be underlying, getting worse. Also, of course, we're seeing a lot of folks presenting with mental health needs. We all as a community went through an extremely difficult time, and managing those emotions and the emotions that we continue to carry is something that we are very concerned about for ourselves as providers, but also for our patients and our clients. Over the pandemic, we've seen that about 1 in 3 folks that come and ask for services at the Mental Health Collaborative mention specifically the pandemic as a reason that's brought them to us for support. And so we want to continue doing that. And that leads me to my third and last exciting thing that we're thinking about and we're aligning to support, and that is the arrival of Afghan community members here to our region. We believe that the International Institute is doing a great job in providing that initial resettlement experience. But given what we've seen and given what we know, many of these folks are going to be arriving with extreme cases of trauma. And we believe that our Mental Health Care Collaborative is poised to provide them the support, the mid and long-term support, really, to be able to address those issues and to really feel like this is a community that's got the resources in place to help them restart their lives and feel like they belong and start to reinvest and give back to this community. And I'll end it by saying, in the same way that my family chose to do so at every juncture of our adult lives, and I continue passionately and fervently to do in every career choice that I make, and every day as I go to CASA and show up for work, if you will, to really give back, because I believe that is the best way that I can thank those that supported me. And with that, I'm going to move to our last slide and just encourage you guys, if you want to learn more about CASA, what we do, or how to get involved, you can go to our website and learn more about us there, and open it up for questions or comments if folks want to have a bit of a dialogue.
Thanks so much, Diego. Really appreciate it. Just so that everybody knows, I'm familiar with CASA because I serve on their board. It's just such a great work, and much of it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for our SLU care clinicians, as well as the docs of the Washington University Physicians Group, as well as strong partnerships with Barnes Jewish and SSM Healthcare. So I'm really glad that you were talking about some of the things that you're looking forward to down the road. I'm curious, I mean, obviously one of the emphases that you see even in the name is for Spanish-speaking persons, but how is CASA working with and serving the African-American community of St. Louis?
That's a great question, and the way that we've historically and moving forward partnered to serve the African American community is by leveraging our resources with federally qualified healthcare centers and other organizations who specialize in this, and providing a resource for those who can be better served at CASA, and then referring folks who we interact with to those resources in the community. So in a way, we're building a network and a safety net where folks can get, if you will, a warm referral between organizations, so that their pathway from the need to the most appropriate resources is accelerated, and is one that is done in a very sort of human, warm, and dignified way.
Great, thank you. Certainly open for others to ask questions.
I've got a question. Diego, beautiful presentation. Thank you so much. And I think for someone who grew up speaking English and no other foreign languages, how is CASA managing all the various languages that the patients speak?
Hi, Julia. Nice to see you. That's a very good question. And the answer sometimes when I say it, even to me, sounds unintuitive. So I'll try to walk us through here. You have to slow down and provide space for multiple truths, because culture communicates through language, and language communicates culture. So just knowing what a word means in Spanish and in English does not mean you understand what that word is intended to convey. And so what we're able to do at CASA is really slow down that medical engagement to ask deeper questions and to create learning across both sides of the relationship between the provider and the patient, so they can really understand what's going on. And Nakarit's story is a great example of that. She was communicating her needs in Spanish, and maybe others were, through an interpreter, hearing those needs translated into English. But what didn't translate is the culture. What didn't translate was the meaning and the way that she intended those words to carry weight. And when she came to CASA, because we have that multicultural, multilingual background, we were able to bring that up into the conversation. And that's what led to her getting the care that she needed. And so what we do when we receive folks whose preferred language is not Spanish or English, which are our expertise, we bring in, through the International Institute and other partners, folks who do walk that life and who have that experience to help us, CASA, the provider and the patient, learn and gain that expertise and that knowledge. And then, of course, we start to implement that for the organization moving forward. So over our 11 plus years, we've learned a thing or two about certain cultures, but there's always more to learn, and there are always new cultures. For example, we're now learning a lot about the Afghan culture, things we thought we knew and we didn't know correctly, things we never knew. And it's just a humbling, always inquisitive learning experience, and putting into action the things that we learn through respectful conversations and slowing things down and really hearing our patients.
Thank you, because that was where I was going with that, was how CASA is able to continue providing services for languages other than Spanish, given the diversity now of the patients.
If anyone else?
Hi, Diego. My name is Eric Anderson. Thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. And congratulations on the great work that Casa de Salud continues to do in the community. I wonder, this is maybe more of a clinical question, but I wonder if you could talk about a little bit in terms of, I know you have the mental health collaborative going on, and you talked about the increase in mental health challenges that your clients are seeing. Can you talk a little bit more about that, how that's presenting? What do you see the major sort of mental health challenges that folks are presenting with, and yeah, and how that kind of wraps into the pandemic?
Yeah, great observations. I'll answer the question, but I do think we have to sort of do so with the caveat that one of the things that we don't want to do is sort of pigeonhole some of these challenges that the immigrant community are facing in terms of mental health. And I'll use myself as an example. You know, in my Paraguayan Latino culture, we really do lack the words to express mental health needs. And so the first challenge is to understand the words that someone like I would use to express that need, to ask for help, if you will. Once you get past that first threshold, the next thing that we sort of generally see is folks that are struggling with anxiety and depression. In many cases, depression will present first psychosomatically, so they'll feel like there's something physically wrong, but really what's presenting is depression or the effects of depression, and in some cases, anxiety. And so walking folks through the connection and also the benefit of getting mental health care is something that's been very helpful. And I think the other thing that we've done very successfully at the Mental Health Collaborative is we walk into the prospective relationship between the client in the Mental Health Collaborative and the therapist without really any expected outcomes. So the first thing we ask is, how are you feeling? And tell us in your own words what it's like. The second thing, once we've sort of understood what we think might be presenting, we ask, is there a particular modality that you're most comfortable with? Is there a particular type of therapist that you might be most comfortable with? And really take those baby steps into making a match between the prospective client and the therapist, and then allowing them to continue that conversation so that the mental health needs can really come out and be shared amongst client and therapist. And so again, just being really open to wherever that leads us is, I think, what leads to a lot of the success. And one of the things I love saying about the Mental Health Collaborative, it's just a wee 3 years old, if you will, but we've experienced growth on a monthly basis every single month since we've launched it throughout the entire pandemic. And we've seen that clients stay engaged with their therapist longer and longer and longer every month. So when we started 3 years ago, on average, folks would have 1 or 2 sessions, and then they would disconnect from the services. Now they're staying engaged on average 11 sessions. And so that's really a demonstration that the way that we're approaching it is working, and that our sort of openness to hearing how they describe what they're going through, what their challenges are, is a better approach than kind of thinking about it from the other side, right? And sort of thinking about those standard definitions and going into the relationship with a certain idea of what one might encounter.
I'll add, Diego, that Eric is in charge of a program here that's looking at student wellness, the Student Wellness Task Force. And of course, some of those challenges, mental health challenges, also present themselves among our student body as well. And for many of the same reasons, because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, really, Diego. Thank you. As Barb rightly pointed out, a very impressive presentation. I really appreciate it. I just want to remind everybody that on the Feast of St. Francis Xavier, which is Friday, December 3rd, we will have Father Hung Pham, who is the director of the Central and Southern Province Office of Ignatian Spirituality. So he is going to be speaking of the apostolic preference to show the way to God through the spiritual exercises and discernment. So that should promise to be quite good as well. Father Pham is also offering an Advent retreat that we will be posting on our social media sites as well. He's quite well known internationally and should provide a really great presentation for all of us. So hope to see you on December 3rd, again at noon. So Diego, thanks so much for joining us. And for all of you, thanks for taking some time to be with us as we continue to celebrate the Ignatian year and continue to promote the mission and the good work that so many people do here, as well as our partners here in St. Louis and at St. Louis U. So have a great afternoon, everyone.